I'm talking about something called metabolic syndrome. Don't worry, I'll tell you what that is in a moment. But as of 2016, 88% of Americans had some evidence of metabolic syndrome. That means 12% back in 2016. So it's only gotten worse. So a lot of people are now quoting 90% of Americans have metabolic syndrome, leaving a mere 10% of us, this is adults, metabolically healthy. Well, no wonder, no wonder we're so sick. So what are we talking about? First of all, the study was an NHANES study, so that stands for the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So the data they got was evaluating close to 9,000 people between 2009 and 2016. So metabolic syndrome, the facets of it include obesity or having an apple shape, meaning your waist circumference is larger than your hip circumference. So you've got that belly weight, central adiposity is also called, versus pear shape, which is the weight is more in the bottom area, thighs, butt, which is a healthier place to have it, versus apple shape. So that's number one. You have elevated overall cholesterol is another factor, elevated triglycerides, not enough of the good cholesterol called HDL cholesterol. What else is on my list? High fasting glucose, meaning you're moving toward prediabetes or diabetes. So when you take your annual blood test and you should go in fasting, and that number is elevated, so that's a high fasting glucose. Triglycerides are a type of fat, so your calories, if you don't use them, are stored as triglycerides, and then when you do use them, your body can burn them. But elevated triglycerides are also part of metabolic syndrome. So that's the list of things, and what they're saying is that 88%, extrapolated to 90% at this point, of Americans have at least one of those factors. And probably if you look around at friends and family, adult-wise, you go, yeah, that's true. So instead of just saying, bummer, we're all really sick, let's look at what we can do about it. So some key factors, and I'm going to start with one that's a shocker, which is poop. Now, why do I say that? You might go, no, I am Dr. Vicki, I'm pooping. But I can tell you that I would say close to 90% of my patients that I speak to, they're not pooping well. So they're either constipated and they don't know it, their stool is not formed correctly. It should be a nice brown banana that's easily passed, medium brown in color, once or twice a day. And people are doing a whole variety of other things. We've done videos just on poop, but the whole point is that you have to eliminate. So we have to eliminate toxins, and I'm going to talk about all the rest of the other 8 aspects that you can do for diet and lifestyle that can get you away from this metabolic syndrome. Because metabolic syndrome, we just went over the list. What is it creating? The number 1 killer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and stroke. So these are our biggest killers, and really impacting a healthy lifestyle and a vivacious life with these diseases. And so the good news is it's reversible. Unless it's gone on for way too long, these things are reversible. So I wasn't kidding, but I was like putting this list together, and I'm like, yes, and elimination. The body has to be able to eliminate. And unfortunately, most Americans are really having a problem. I saw my youngest patient today was age 7, and the oldest was age 74, and neither one of them were eliminating correctly and didn't really know it. So a lot of times this is not something we understand is abnormal, because we're used to what our body does. So the rest of it, processed food, highly processed, prepackaged foods, highly palatable foods, they're called, that are really, you really can't call them food. They're so processed. There's so many chemicals in them. They're really a chemistry experiment that causes you to crave them and love them and buy them repeatedly, but they're doing nothing for your health, and quite demonstrably compromising your health. It is the reason for that central adiposity in many people. It's the reason for the increased cholesterol and triglycerides, and the low HDL, the low good cholesterol, and of course the elevated blood sugar. So the highly processed foods, everybody agrees. I don't care what camp you want to be in, from carnivore to vegan, everybody agrees that we consume too much highly processed food. It's up to about 60% of the calories in Americans. It's shocking, if not higher than that actually. And it's very much creating this problem. So I know it's a big step, and you can do it gradiently, but you really have to diminish those highly processed foods that are coming in. And I know they're easy and they're cheap, but they're killing you. That's the bottom line. So as long as we're talking about the bad guys, you really have to cut your sugar. I know I'm full of good news today. You don't want to consume more than 12 grams of sugar, and also you have to decrease your alcohol. So the studies that, alcohol is good for you and red wine is good for you have really been refuted. So we're really looking at maybe a glass a week you can get away with. Much more than that, and it's acting as a toxin and creating a lot of these inflammatory issues, then leading to metabolic syndrome. So those are the bad. Now, what about the good? So we want to eat real food. I know that's a mouthful, but what does this include? So it includes fresh vegetables and fresh fruit. And no, fresh fruit is not bad for you. I've done several videos on this. Sources of protein, plant and animal. It turns out when they look at Americans, generally speaking, overall we get enough protein. Now as soon as I say that, people will point out the elderly because they are having trouble chewing, because their teeth are bothering them, or they're elderly and they've lost their appetite, so they're not getting enough protein. And yes, that is a category. Generally speaking, not looking at the elderly, Americans are getting enough protein. And the RDA is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Most people are getting at least 1.2 grams per kilogram. Then you can also go into the elite athlete discussion. Yes, they need more, but generally speaking, if you just take your weight in pounds, divide it by 2.2, that will get you your weight in kilograms. And also think with what your body weight should be. So if you're 20 pounds overweight, don't base it based on that as far as how many grams of protein you need, but where should your weight be, and do it based on that. So you take your weight in pounds, divide it by 2.2, and then that will give you the number, and then you multiply that by 1.2, and that will give you how many grams of protein you need in a day. And you can kind of keep track of this for a week. There's a lot of different apps. You can put what you're eating in and get an idea of where you fall. If you're an average American, you're probably getting more than enough and probably beyond 1.2 grams, but see, and then adjust based on that. So healthy protein, you want to make sure you're not getting a lot of saturated fat. Again, if you're using a little app for a bit to see how much saturated fat you're consuming, you want it under probably 8% of your total calories, saturated fat, because that is going to raise cholesterol and raise the bad cholesterol, the LDL. And I know somebody's going to come back and say there's nothing wrong with LDL cholesterol. There's nothing wrong with it until it's elevated, and then there's a lot wrong with it. So you want to assess how much saturated fat. You want to get good clean protein, and there's a lot of plant sources of protein that you can utilize as well. Just make sure you're getting enough. Again, most Americans are. And then what about our fats? So we don't want the saturated fat in abundance, but we do want our monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. And if you look at the Mediterranean diet historically, not the Mediterranean diet of today, unfortunately, but the historical Mediterranean diet, that will give you a good idea of some good sources of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. So that's your fats, your carbs, and your protein, and that's the good stuff. What about timing? So intermittent fasting is really a good idea. Now, if you're somebody who's had trouble with diets in the past or eating disorders, then this is not for you. But for the average person, a 12 to 14 hour fast is pretty easy. You're sleeping through most of it. You want to not eat about 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. 3 would be lovely. And then you sleep for 8, so you're already up to 11. So you're just about there. get up, drink some water, do what you need to do, and so you're up to that 12 to 14 hours pretty readily, and see how you do with that. It's really good to give the body a rest from consuming calories, and there's a lot of good evidence to support that for longevity. Exercise, finding something you'll do is really critical, and not just cardio but also resistance training. And you can look up what you can do for resistance training. You don't have to get a gym membership. There's plenty on social media to help you with ideas. There's resistance bands. I mean, there's, cans of food. There's things you can do that have some weight to them for resistance training. But it really is important to have resistance training all your life, especially as you're getting older, into your 40s, 50s, and beyond. You want to really make sure you're working against gravity to make your bones stronger, etc. So resistance training is important. Just want to make sure, I think I said, maybe I didn't say hydrate. So you have to hydrate, make sure you're getting enough water, sleep. 8 hours is a sweet spot, I know some people who can get away, they seem to get away with less. Some people need a little bit more, but 8 is a sweet spot. You're not being indulgent getting 8 hours of sleep. I wear a Whoop band. I have no affiliation with the company, but I found that it really helped me see what I was doing to get a better and or worse night's sleep. So it helped me as a metric. There's Oura rings, there's Apple Watches, there's a lot of things you can do. But I think that technology is quite helpful because it's hard to know. I'm a clinician, and for me it was hard to know. So I think these metrics are really helpful. So we talked about cutting the sugar, cutting the alcohol, and getting away from the processed foods. So there it is. So there's a metabolic syndrome. It's leading to heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And I could easily say it's killing most degenerative diseases we're trying to avoid. Metabolic syndrome is an undercurrent to that. But it just doesn't have to be. You can make these diet and lifestyle changes. If you need help, that's why I'm here with my team. We'd be delighted to help you. But we don't have to be the sickest country. We don't have to be actually living less long than we've ever lived before. We don't have to have children that are not healthy at a very young age, but we do. But we can make a difference, and that's why I'm here. So if you found this information helpful, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. The more people subscribe, the more people see this data. So I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.